Welcome to another episode of Cinema Bros, where Spen and Nick, we rate movies, TV shows, review them for you and for your enjoyment. We've done
Don't do the
Barbie.
song. Don't do the song. Don't do the song.
I wasn't gonna do the song. I'm taking I haven't had much of a voice this week, so I'm taking a week off from the song. I gotta fine tune it. I gotta polish it. I got some feedback. Not everybody loves the song as much as me and Nick do, especially as much as Nick. It was one of Nick's favorite songs.
I have a new one. Cinema Bros. Cinema Bros. It's just Animal House.
Oh, okay. National Lampoon's Animal House.
Yeah. Who didn't like the song?
Right. It was okay. It needs some work. Look, we're gonna work on it again.
Did other people say they don't like the song?
There were one or two people that weren't crazy about it.
Who? I want to know who.
Yeah, we're not going to get into who on the podcast. Have you watched anything decent recently before we get into this week's review?
I finished Netflix's TV show reprisal of The Lincoln Lawyer, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I thought it was fantastic. So Lincoln Lawyer, I think it's a 2011 movie with Matthew McConaughey. And they brought it back as there's been 2 seasons thus far on Netflix. You know who's in it that you would like? Neve Campbell from Scream.
I do like Neve Campbell. Maybe I'll check it out. Probably not. There's a little bit of static on your microphone, by the way. Not sure if you were aware of that. Is it your headphones?
It's probably my AirPods.
It might be. If you want to just turn the input down a little bit, because I'm hearing it. I don't know if the audience is going to hear it. Hopefully they won't.
It's a little loud. All right, let me see what I can do. Manuel Garcia Rolfo plays Mickey Haller, who was originated by Matthew McConaughey. It was actually based on a book by Michael Connelly, but then put into film by Matthew McConaughey. But he is phenomenal. He just got discovered. He's probably early 40s, and he should be put in a lot more things because he is just a really likable, charismatic actor.
Did you see the McConaughey movie?
I did not, but I want to go back and watch it after watching this.
Is this a prequel or a sequel?
I'm actually not sure. It might just be a reboot. It might be the same stories. I'm not sure, though.
All right. Would you like to know what I've been watching recently?
It's probably stupid, but sure.
Aside from Captain Fall, which I've continued watching on Netflix, I read the description of the show last week. It's an animated show, very funny. I've also been watching The Godfather of Harlem, starring Forrest Whitaker. It's about Bumpy Johnson and his takeover of the heroin game in Harlem. I forget the time period. I think he gets out of jail, which is the beginning of the movie in the mid-'70s. But he clashes with the mafia a lot. There's some great actors in that show. Vincent D'Onofrio, Chaz Palminteri,
Michael Michaels.
He's not in it. Artie Bucco's wife from The Sopranos. I can't think of her name right now. She was in The Fisher King, a movie that our father loves. In fact, I'm gonna look her up.
Am I still sounding staticky? I turned my input down.
You definitely sound a little bit better. Who else is in The Godfather of Harlem that I like? Lucy Fry, Eric LeRae Harvey, he's been in a bunch of stuff. He's been in Boardwalk Empire. Giancarlo Esposito is in The Godfather of Harlem. Catherine Narducci, that's who I was thinking of. She's great. She's been in a ton of stuff. You've definitely seen her.
They call her the Dooch.
Paul Sorvino's in this show. There's just a lot of Yul Vazquez, who you've definitely seen in different movies. Bo Dietl's in this show. There's a million people in Godfather of Harlem. It's a very well done show if you like crime, if you like drama. And it's got a little bit of real, true crime story stuff in there as well. And then the other show I'm watching, Nick, is Justified with Timothy Olyphant. I watched the last few seasons of Justified in college, and I really liked it. And I know they just sort of did a reprisal of the show Justified. I think it's called Primeval or something, and it takes place in Detroit. So I'm rewatching the whole show so I can eventually finish with Justified. It's called City Primeval. So that's basically the reprisal of Justified they're doing. Justified lasted from 2010 to 2015. So those are the 3 shows that I'm currently watching.
You know, I've never seen Justified. I like Timothy Olyphant, but I love the show The Good Place by Mike Schur, which is obviously Ted Danson, Kristen Bell. Phenomenal show. And Maya Rudolph, who plays God in that show, is obsessed with Timothy Olyphant's character in Justified. And he actually makes an appearance in the last season in like a fictional heaven. And she like zaps a fictional version of him and he just sits next to her. And it is Timothy Olyphant playing his character.
Raylan Givens. Raylan Givens is his name. It's funny because it's definitely like, it's a Southern kind of country type show, but he just plays the character so well. I mean, he's a U.S. Marshal. He doesn't want to be in his home state of Kentucky, but that's where he was reassigned. And he's fucking amazing.
Yeah. Is there anyone who does like Southern old timey better than Walter Goggins?
Yeah, so I think it's Walton Goggins, right? There's no Walter.
Is it Walton Goggins?
I think it's Walton Goggins.
You're right.
He is the bad guy throughout Justified. Him and Timothy Olyphant's character, they came up together. But basically, one joined the justice good side of things and one joined crime and Nazism. And that's
I love Walton Goggins. I think he's phenomenal.
He's great. They both, don't get me wrong, they both made careers from Justified. They're both electric. They're on camera chemistry, the dialogue that they do and the scenes that they're together. It's must watch television. Now, the acting outside of those two guys it's not amazing. One of the guys in the Marshall office, he's actually in Eurotrip. He's Coop from Eurotrip.
Well, for those who don't know, I just want to say Walter Goggins is in The Hateful Eight. He's Chris Mannix. Yes. He's the main kind of young guy. Just so people aren't sure.
Yeah, and the guy I'm referring to in Eurotrip, I want to look this up so I get his name right.
Walter Goggins is also in a show I really liked that got canceled where he played like a struggling dad. It was
Oh, I know what you're talking about. You like that show.
I thought it was cute. I like a nice, easy, wholesome show at times. And it was just called, sorry, before I lose my thought.
We are terrible at having this information ready. He was
we don't know where it's gonna go. The unicorn. We don't know where it's gonna go.
We don't. And Jacob Pitts was the actor I'm thinking of. He's the main character in Eurotrip's best friend. He's the one who has that famous line, dude, You made out with your sister. He is like, I've never seen him in anything else. And he's in 5 seasons of Justified because he's pretty much Timothy Olyphant's sidekick or one of them.
Oh, funny. I only know him from Eurotrip. Yeah.
I don't know if you'd like.
I recognize.
I don't know if you'd like Justified or Godfather of Harlem, but if you're in the mood for a crime show, they're both really good.
What I will say is, now that you mentioned it, we have to review Eurotrip at some point on this show.
That's definitely a must. All right, let's get into this week's movie review. It was Nick's turn, and he chose Hunt for the Wilderpeople. So, Hunt for the Wilderpeople is a Taika Waititi directed film. It came out in 2016. It is streamable for anyone who wants to watch it on Netflix. It stars Sam Neill, who I was convinced was in Game of Thrones. And I don't think he was.
But he looks like he looks like a mixture of every famous actor ever.
For some reason, I thought he was Beric Dondarrion. And when I looked it up, I couldn't. And he's been in 150 films. Julian Dennison, who plays Ricky Baker, Rima Te Wayata.
Sam Neill is most famous for being in the original Jurassic Park. He was Dr. Alan Grant in the original Jurassic Park.
Correct. Rachel House plays Paula Hall, who is the Social Security woman. And then there's just a bunch of other people in this movie. The only notable actor, Riz Darby. He plays Psycho Sam. And then Taika Waititi is actually in this movie. He acts as the minister during the beginning of the movie. So real fast, Nick, I'm going to read the synopsis that IMDb has, and then we can get into our review.
Before you say that, I just want to say, for those who don't know, Taika Waititi, What We Do in the Shadows, he created. He did Jojo Rabbit. He wrote and directed Jojo Rabbit, and he played Hitler in Jojo Rabbit. He's from New Zealand. This film takes place in New Zealand. It's actually the highest grossing film in New Zealand history. And it I don't know if it won. It might have won. It was in 2016 Sundance. I'm not sure if you looked that up, but it's had incredible accolades. I'll let Spen explain the trailer, but the reason I wanted to see it was because I love Taika Waititi. I think he's a fantastic director. And this was kind of a film he did before he got really big.
Yeah, I'm looking at the awards now on IMDb. I'm seeing Best Independent Film Award nominee, Audience Choice for Best Overall Film at a film festival. You're looking for Sundance, right? Let me see.
I don't think it won. It got critical acclaim and it was featured in Sundance.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the other thing about this movie, Nick, is you mentioned that Taika Waititi is from New Zealand. This movie takes place in New Zealand. Almost every single actor in this movie, I want to say, aside from Sam Neill, is from New Zealand.
Yeah,
I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It takes you a second to get acclimated to the accents, and then you kind of got to pay attention because they all seem, and they're not just from New Zealand. They are from. I'm sorry, now I'm gonna remember what it's called. Like it's not called the Boonies, but it's like the. Do you remember how they refer to it in the actual movie? It's like the middle of nowhere is called the something, like the ditch or the.
I don't remember.
I'll try to look it up, but I'll let you explain the plot and kind of what this movie's about.
Yeah, and Sam Neill, by the way, who I assumed wasn't from New Zealand, he was born in Northern Ireland, but his father was from New Zealand, Dermot Neal.
The Bush. The
Bush. You're right, the Bush. His family moved to the South Island of New Zealand in 1954. So Sam Neill did grow up in New Zealand. So if you click on every actor in this movie, they're either all from New Zealand or they live in New Zealand. It's kind of cool. So here's the synopsis.
The Bush is what they call like the backwoods, or the Boonies is called the Bush in New Zealand.
So here's the IMDb description of the movie. A national manhunt is ordered for a rebellious kid and his foster uncle who go missing in the wild New Zealand bush. It doesn't explain everything. This is a little bit better. Reclusive country folk Bella and Hector become foster parents to Ricky, a problem child from the city. After some adjustment, things go reasonably well. However, Bella's quick and untimely death means that Hector must now look after Ricky himself, and they haven't been getting along. Her death causes Child Services to decide to send Ricky back to the orphanage. Ricky refuses to go back and runs away, ultimately sparking a national manhunt for him and Hector. That second synopsis is a much easier sort of way to tell the plot of this movie. That's really it. So basically, the kid runs away, and Julian Dennison, who plays the child in this movie, he was also in Deadpool 2. He plays the angry child in Deadpool 2, who Josh Brolin's character is hunting down to kill in that movie. He's on the run in that movie. He's on the run in this movie. His uncle, Hector or Heck, doesn't really want to take care of him, but goes searching for him because he obviously cares a little bit about him in the woods, in the bush. And the exciting sort of incident in this movie is Hector immediately twists his ankle and sprains it. And now they're sort of stranded in the forest. And that's when you start to kind of think, okay, they're not going to get home quickly. This is going to just snowball into a ton of different events. And the majority of this movie does take place in the wilderness in New Zealand.
I mean, that kind of sets it in motion. But what I think the most enticing part for viewers and why people would want to watch it is it's an unlikely pairing of people. It's a little brat-nosed kid, snot-nosed kid, who's hilarious and entertaining and thinks he's a gangster, getting paired up with this really old-timey, illiterate, New Zealand-born and bred old man who wants nothing but to never see anybody again and kind of retreat off into the wilderness and do nothing. And they get stuck together, and now they go on this crazy goose chase from the police because people think that the old man kidnapped the kid, and then it later develops into he's a pedophile who touched the kid.
Well, I want to talk about that scene specifically because that was a pretty good scene. I think that was the first scene where there was a little bit of levity, right? After the mom died.
Before we get into kind of that, I'll say that's Act 2 and 3, right? Act 2 and 3 is then ending up. The mom dies. She's now with just like the fake dad who he calls uncle, and their whole adventure begins. I'll tell you what, the woman who played the mother character who adopts him, she was phenomenal to the point where I understand why the story was set in motion by her dying, because she was a great mom. She loved the kid. Life was perfect. her dying set the story of these two unlikely characters having to depend on each other and support each other and bond. That kind of set the whole story in motion. But I was really sad, not just because her character died, just because I really enjoyed her acting. I thought, and you probably have the Wikipedia up right now, if you could tell me the woman's name, because I want to give credit where credit is due. I thought the woman who played the mother was incredible, to the point where her leaving the movie actually upset me, because I just thought she made the movie better.
So her name was Rima Te Waiata, and she did win an award in New Zealand for Best Supporting Actress in this movie.
Yeah, honestly well deserved. She should have got more recognition for it. There's a scene, one of my favorite scenes at the beginning. She adopts this kid, and he's
well, you got to time out, because what this movie does that's great is it establishes the connection between them so quickly. Right? This is a foster kid who's bounced around from home to home. And you initially think he's going to fucking hate it here. He's going to be a dick. He's not going to be nice to the mom and the dad. And that's essentially what happened is right off the bat, he doesn't speak to the uncle he doesn't speak to Hector. And then what is her name in the movie? Her name is Bella. He doesn't speak to Hector or Bella, his two caretakers. He ignores them. And the way that this woman, Rima Te Waiata, the way that she performs, she almost has this like, listen, you can do what you want. If you're going to run away, great, but you're always going to have a home here, and I'm always going to take care of you, even if you're a little shit.
It is like the definition of unconditional love, and it makes her so likable.
Right. And you get that connection within the first 10 minutes of the movie. So immediately you're like, okay, now this is the definition of a feel-good movie, right? Because immediately you're like, okay, I feel good for this kid who's looks 13 or 14, could never find a home. Now he has these two people, at least one of them unconditionally loves him. Hector, the man, it takes him a little bit longer, but that's what makes her death so compelling, is the connection that they create for the audience so quickly into the movie.
And I mean, you don't even see the death coming. You make sense. You don't see it coming, and you're not even thinking about, like, Hector, who he has to end up getting close with, is an afterthought. Then when he dies, when the wife dies, Bella, the mom, then you're like, oh shit, now I get what's going to happen. But up until that point, it was pretty unpredictable. And I just want to shout out to one of the most famous scenes in the movie is when she has a birthday for Ricky, who's the foster kid, and she sings, and she's playing like this little organ, like this electric organ or weird version of a piano, and she's going, Ricky Baker, Ricky Baker, and he loves it. The kid is like this big fat kid clapping like a schoolboy, and Hector is just fucking staring at them because he hates what's going on. But it's such a fun, weird, bizarre, dry, hilarious, loving scene.
Yeah, I mean, Taika Waititi definitely has his imprint on this entire movie, right? And before I get into the funeral scene, it is kind of confusing on how to address them, right? Because the boy, the child calls them aunt and uncle, but like realistically, they're his foster mom and dad. So it's just you kind of don't know what to call them, and you eventually just call them by their names, Hector and Bella. The second that Bella passes away, it goes straight to the scene where they're in the chapel. And of course, the minister, who's played by Taika Waititi, he's kind of a nut job minister who, he kind of adds a little bit of levity, a little bit of light to the scene. So that's something I did really like about this movie, is every time you thought it was going to be dark and depressing, Taika Waititi kind of made it a little bit comedic. Or he put something in there that makes you think, okay, like I'm not going to be as sad because now I see him acting like kind of a crazy person as this minister.
Yeah, if you've ever watched kind of like British or Australian, New Zealand, like very dry humor, Flight of the Conchords has a similar tone sometimes, where Taika Waititi's the priest at this funeral. I'm referring to this scene Spencer was just talking about, and he's like, she dies and she goes and she opens a door, and what's beyond the door? And the fat kid's like, vegetables? And he's like, no, not vegetables. Not vegetables. Another door. There's another door. In my Australian accent, terrible. But it's just like super silly and dry and weird. But like as Spen put it, even in these moments that should be so sad, like you always laugh and it's always a little bit lighthearted. And it's just done in a way where you still feel those things, but you're still entertained and having a good time watching this movie that at the end of the day is a very sad premise, yet it's viewed in a lens that makes it a lot more digestible.
Did you like how they did the chapter format throughout the movie, where initially it's chapter 1, the bad egg, and that introduces the child? And I don't remember all the chapters, but I think there were 7 or 8 throughout the movie. Did you like that structure? Did that bother you as someone who creates films and writes scripts?
My thing was, okay, so basically what Spen's referring to is there was a tool they used every kind of time there was a change and a turn in the story. They cut to a wide shot and called it like chapter 1 and had like a little fun nickname for it. I think there were 10 chapters, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
10 or 12, I believe there were 10. The weird thing about doing chapters like that, where it's, because, right, a film's already broken down into acts, whether they do a 3-act film or a 5-act film. And those act breakdowns are pretty obvious when you change from one act to another, right? The mom dying and him now having to spend time with the dad, that's an act 1 to act 2 clear break. This might have been maybe act 2 to act 3 if you're depending how you structure things, but it obviously is a clear change in act. The chapters to me were weird because they weren't like equally distant in time. And it was like the first chapter was 20 minutes. The next chapter was 20 minutes. Then it was 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 3 minute. It felt a little forced towards the end. I didn't mind it in the first couple chapters because there was such a clear shift in story and direction as we kept going. But towards the end, it just felt like they were layering chapter names on for the sake of having that tool be used, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay. Before we move on to sort of further down into the story, I did want to point out I loved Rachel House's character, who plays Paula Hall. She is the social services woman. She initially in the beginning of the movie, she drops off the child with the parents and pretty much just shits on him. She's like, yeah, he's a bad egg. He kicks people. He throws things. He kicks things. And once Hector goes looking for Ricky Baker in the woods, she, who's not even a cop, she works for social services, she leads the manhunt with the police to try to find them. And I just thought she was really good, man. And it's funny because, I had never seen this movie. I'm a huge Marvel guy. When you were talking about Taika Waititi, you didn't mention he directed Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder.
Well, those are separate from his kind of. He was hired to do those. These are his.
You're right, but Nick, you know what? 2 actors and actresses are in those at least. Yeah, I think definitely in Ragnarok is Rachel House and Sam Neill. They're both in Ragnarok, and they have such ancillary roles that aren't, they're complete side characters in the movies. But you can just see how Taika Waititi works. Like he puts people he knows in his films. And I love it. And I thought she was excellent in this movie. She had this crazy obsession to basically get Ricky Baker to juvenile hall. That was kind of her motivation.
And the joke was she kept thinking she was a cop. Like she kept
right.
She's chasing these 2 people on a manhunt because they all think that the uncle kidnapped Ricky Baker. And she thinks it's her job as like a secret spy to discover them. Well, and her character just gets progressively more ridiculous. And
there's that great scene where, it ends up being a national story and it's on the New Zealand news and they have her as a guest and they're like, oh, like, what do you think's going on? And she just goes, Ricky Baker, he's a bad kid. He throws things. He kicks things. He lights things on fire. And like, it's so funny that
she keeps saying no child left behind.
Right. No child left behind. Yeah. I thought she was excellent. All right. So we can get further into the story, but basically the first time that Ricky and Hector sort of make outside contact with anybody is they stumble into this house in the middle of the wilderness, in the middle of the bush, if you will, and they're getting supplies. And all of a sudden, the 3 guys who I guess use that facility, they get
campers.
Back.
You could just call them like campers.
The 3 campers. And there's this moment where you don't know if the 3 campers are going to help them or essentially hurt them. And that's where Nick was referring to earlier. Basically, they asked the kid, they go, hey, what has he been doing to you? And they kind of assume that it's been like he's been molesting him or basically sexually assaulting the kid. And the kid, not realizing what he's saying, he goes, yeah, he always wants to play with me, or he never wanted to play with me before. He always tells me to go play by myself. And he basically says all these things that could be misconstrued into sexual innuendo. And
it's very reminiscent. It's reminiscent of School of Rock, where Jack Black goes, your kids have touched me, and I'm sure I've touched them in many ways. And all the parents all of a sudden start freaking out.
Right, exactly. And it leads to the three men calling Hector a pervert. Hector then gets very angry. He jumps them. All of a sudden, the kid whips out the rifle, and boom, Ricky and Hector are now back in control of the room because they have the rifle and they're holding these three men at gunpoint. And that's when you kind of, yeah.
What you just didn't mention was they recognized them as soon as they walked in. The campers recognized Ricky and the uncle because they put up a wanted sign for them all over the bush, all over New Zealand.
And that's kind of also the moment where you realize, oh shit, nobody's gonna fucking help them. Like they're gonna have to stick this thing out because until that moment they had not had contact with anybody else. So in that scene, you're kind of thinking like, what's gonna happen? Are they gonna help? Are they gonna hurt? They leave. They basically they rob the guys. They take all the bullets out of the three campers' guns and they just leave them. And then all of a sudden, those three campers they become part of the manhunt. What else happens in this movie, Nick? There's the scene where they go into another sort of habitat or building in the bush. They find a man who needs medical attention. So Hector sends Ricky out. I forget exactly where he sends him, but then Ricky runs into this girl his age on a horse. Her name is Kahu, and I'm not even going to try to. She's played by Tiorior Nagate Melbourne. But she's a girl. She's around Ricky's age. Thank you. So Ricky ends up going to her house, meeting her dad. Her dad's a huge fan because he's been watching the news.
That's not her dad. That's got to be her older. That's got to be like her older brother.
Oh, it's her old. It's not her dad. I thought that was her dad.
He's like 30. She's like 15.
Oh, okay.
You think so?
Yeah. I don't know. His name is PC Andy Tappert, I think, in the movie. I thought that was her dad, but maybe it's not. I guess it's an adult
There's
figure.
Another guy, maybe.
A guardian. He's a huge fan of Ricky's. He's seen him on the news. So this is also the first time that Ricky is in a house since he lived with Bella and Hector and right before he ran away. And also you can tell this is sort of the first time that he's talked to a girl his age in a long time. He's kind of taken aback. He's a little bit heartstruck. There's just a lot going on. And you know, what I loved about his performance is he shows a lot in his facial expressions during that scene where he's at her house. He doesn't have to say a lot. I think he doesn't say anything the first like 5 or 6 minutes he's in their house because her quote unquote dad brother just keeps talking. And he's like, oh my God, you're Ricky Baker. Let's take a picture. Let me take a selfie. So what happens is he's supposed to go there and get help for a man with medical attention. He ends up falling asleep, wakes up the next day, runs back to the place that Hector, his uncle, was at, and he finds that it's been ransacked by the cops and the people who are on the lookout for Ricky and Hector. They reconnect pretty quickly after that. But yeah, is there anything else I'm missing before we get to the climax and just how it ended and if we liked it?
I mean, we don't have to, go in excruciating detail, but it's exactly what you'd think. There's just up and downs between this unlikely duo who at first despise each other and slowly start to warm up to each other. They're running away from the police. They're hiding from the police. And what I like about the film too is it teaches you a lot about surviving in the outdoors. And he teaches them how to catch animals, how to fire a rifle, he skins an animal at some point. They cook either like a squirrel or a rabbit or something at some point. He catches a fish. At one point, they go face to face, with a huge boar, is it?
Dude, yeah. So they both have dogs. Yeah. And the boar kills one of the dogs. And it's sad. I mean, that's a moment where part of surviving is you're going to lose people and pets close to you. And they lose one of the dogs. And who's sad?
It's a little bit gruesome, but it's not a gruesome movie by any means. That's really the only part where they have to kill this boar where you think it's a little bit bloody and a little bit like, holy shit. But
do you remember both the dogs' names?
Neither.
Zag and Tupac.
Nice. I just think it did a really good job of showing a fun outdoor survival movie about loss and two people coming together. And it's this fun manhunt. What this movie does really well, and I know we're not giving it a rating yet, but what this movie does really well is it keeps the stakes high and it keeps you because they're constantly running from the cops and they constantly get more and more in trouble, more and more wanted. They get a bounty on them. He's now a pedophile. They want to arrest them. More and more cops are coming to the scene. It keeps raising the stakes as the movie progresses and makes you want to watch and see what happens. So it does a good job of leading you as you're going and making it more and more enticing. If I had to give any critique before we get to the climax about Act 2, is maybe there were 10 to 15 minutes too long in the middle of the movie. I felt it dragged a little bit, especially when he goes to that girl's house. And I understand the coming of age with the girl and the first time he's talking to a girl who he definitely has a crush on. It just felt like that could have been a 3 to 5 minute scene, and he ends up being with her for 10 to 15 minutes, and the guy comes out and he sleeps there and he wakes up there. So if I had to give any critique, and this might be my only critique of the entire movie because I really enjoy the movie, is the middle part is long, not in any way where I think it's still 100% worth watching, but it drags for maybe 10% of the film.
I think it was her dad, because I remember the scene where he goes, "Where are your parents?" She says, "Dead." And she goes, "I'm just kidding. My mom's working a night shift. My dad's in the other room," or something.
Oh, okay.
So I think it was her dad. One scene we are glossing over is when they dump her ashes close to the sky.
Yeah, so Bella, Ricky Baker, the kid, takes the stepmom's ashes without the dad knowing, without Hector knowing, and has them in his backpack the entire time. And towards the end of the film, she had a wish at some point of wanting to be thrown at the highest point. There's like a cliff where she used to go when she was younger, and it's her favorite spot. And they end up
called it close to the sky.
Close to the sky, and they end up kind of dumping it together. But you're getting to the climax. You wanted to get to the climax of them.
I did. There's a lot of important moments in this movie, and I think it would have been a disservice to gloss over that, because you think that Hector might be mad that this kid took his wife's ashes, and he says something like, he's like, "You brought Bella, huh? Good call." Like, he was like happy that he did that.
Yeah. This movie is very unpredictable, which I enjoy a lot.
Yeah. The climax, and I think I liked it. I don't know. I have to go back and really think about it. But basically, they end up pairing with this crazy guy who lives out in the woods, and they end up getting tracked and boxed in by the police. And this guy has a truck. So the kid, who's like 13, 14 years old, he ends up driving the truck with Hector in the passenger seat, and they go on this wild car chase. And
which the car chase is like, holy shit, this budget just went up, because there's like tanks and like 20 cars.
Yeah, that was a pretty wild scene. So the car chase lasts about 6 to 8 minutes, and then Hector's pretty much ready to call it quits, and he's like, "Hey, we gotta give ourselves up. There's only one way this ends." And the kid, who's still kind of living in this half fantasy, half reality, he's like, "No, I want to go out in a blaze of glory. Let's go out shooting." So it ends with the kid basically, Hector tries to give himself up to the police. The kid takes out a gun and he points it at Hector, and he wasn't really going to shoot. And then one of the three campers who have pretty much been following them throughout the movie, he has the gun pointed at Hector, and one of the policemen end up tackling the camper. So the camper fires off a shot, misses, but that startles the kid, and the kid ends up firing a shot, and he shoots Hector in the butt. They both get arrested. They both go to, they don't go to jail, but the end of the movie is the kid ends up getting adopted. Ricky Baker gets adopted by that little girl and her dad in the bush. They adopt him, and then Hector goes to jail for, I think, a very short amount of time, right?
And he gets released right away and goes to like a halfway house.
Right. So he's in a halfway house. Ricky goes to visit him, and you tell the rest. Honestly, Nick, you're gonna laugh at me. I get a little choked up talking about it, because
I cried at the end.
It definitely was an emotional ending. It had me in tears for sure.
Basically, there's another, and this film does a really good job of leaving breadcrumbs and having these little motifs and things they use throughout. And there's a whole thing where Ricky loves writing haikus, and he mentions that when he was in juvie, or when he sees a therapist because he's been in a lot of trouble, that they told him to write haikus on whatever he's feeling. Now, I'm not going to worry about the syllable count. I think a haiku is like 757 or 575. It's a little poem.
One or the other.
But he keeps saying it throughout. He'll read a poem. He'll say, "I had a good day. I met this person. It was great. I like this." And he kind of keeps reading it as a tool to describe where he is and how he's feeling about certain things. It's basically his way of journaling.
Which, by the way, time out. I don't think you mentioned this because I've been listening to you. One other part of Hector and this child's relationship is that Hector can't read. Hector never learned how to read, so he's illiterate. So initially, how Hector hurts his ankle is the kid, Ricky Baker, gives him a hard time about not reading. And Hector gets really mad and he goes to attack the kid and he sprains his ankle as he's lunging for him. So the end of the movie, as Nick's talking about the haiku, it comes full circle because during their adventure, Ricky was trying to teach Hector what a haiku is. And because Hector's illiterate, he wasn't really able to understand. He wasn't able to comprehend it. And the last scene, Hector gives Ricky a haiku. And do you remember what the haiku was?
It was like, I met this boy. He was cool.
I met this fat boy.
Yeah. A haiku is 17 syllables, 575.
So the thing is, I met this fat boy. We had a lot of fun. He was the best, or something like that.
It was the best, or something like that. Yeah, and you got to choke up because if you watch the movie, Hector is such a hard ass, and he's a great actor, and you could tell he means well, but he has no idea how to show it or how to express himself. And really, the only other time in the entire movie he's been like vulnerable is when they were sleeping in like a bunk bed at a camp when they were hiding from the cops, and he said like, "You're a cool guy. Like people wouldn't mind hanging with you. Like you're not so bad." Right. Like his way of complimenting Ricky was so mild and somewhat cold, and you can tell he just didn't know what to say in that moment. So for him to stop Ricky at the end, and Ricky's about to walk away for good, and read him a haiku and tell him he wants to come with him and go on an adventure with him. Like I looked over, I watched it with our dad, me and Spen's dad, and I looked over and he's the biggest movie crier. And we were both just like bawling because it was such a touching moment.
It's hard not to, man. It's hard not to. All right. What do you give this movie?
I would give this movie a 9.1 out of 10.
I think I give it a 7.6.
Wow. Okay.
I really
biases. It's not your type of movie.
But I really liked it. I think my 7.6 is high praise because I thought it was a good movie. I agree that there were certain scenes that were stretched a little bit. And I think that maybe add a few minutes to the beginning and I can get to know Bella a little bit more. Maybe develop that connection a little bit more, right? Maybe, and I don't know. There was parts for me that I just wish were a little. I was able to spend more time with her before she passed. Like she got an award for Best Supporting Actress. She's in the movie for less than 10 minutes, maybe.
No, she's in 25
you don't think
minutes.
So? 25 minutes? I think you're right.
But I think 15, 20 minutes cut out of this movie, and it's a near perfect movie, in my opinion.
Yeah. So there was that. I also just, outside of, I guess, Hector, 4 actors, right? Hector, Ricky Baker, Bella, and then Paula, the social service woman.
And a bunch of fun side characters.
Well, there's no one really else. Like I didn't think, anybody else was great in terms of acting in this movie. Even Riz Darby's character, the psycho, what was his name? Psycho Sam, I think they called him.
Yeah. He's pretending to be a Bush.
Oh, I hated his character. And I like Psycho Sam. I like Riz Darby. Riz Darby's great in Flight of the Conchords. He's been in a ton of stuff. I just thought his character was sort of over the top and unnecessary. So
I think it was fine.
Yeah. The climax too, for me, I didn't love it. I didn't love it. I'm going to be honest with you. The fact that the kid wanted to go out in a blaze of glory, like, I get it. I understand he'd rather die than go back to juvenile hall because that's really what we're talking about, right? He did not want to go back to juvie. But there was just something about that where it's like, okay, kid, like, you really going to get shot up by a bunch of cops? Like, come on.
You kind of knew they weren't going to shoot him, though. He knew they weren't going to shoot him.
7.6 is my review. I'm sticking to it.
He was a little bit untouchable. The last thing I'll say, and this might be helpful for people, is this movie to me is a lot like the movie Swiss Army Man. If you like Swiss Army Man, I think you'd like this movie. That's Daniel Radcliffe and Paul Dano. It's written and directed by the Daniels, who also did Everything Everywhere All at Once. That was their big debut. Just a weird, wacky, dry, yet wholesome and feel-good movie about two unlikely characters coming together in the middle of nowhere and trying to survive. And almost at the same time, Ricky was so, chastised for being a foster kid and all the shit happening to him. You find out that Sam Neill's character, Hector, has also been chastised and felt alone. He can't read. He grew up. He said he was in a lot of trouble. He said Bella, just as Bella took Ricky in, Bella took him in. So they had a lot more similarities than you think, and they end up bonding over it. So I think it's worth a watch. Spen, tell the people where they could watch it. Was it on Netflix?
It's streaming on Netflix. It's streaming on Netflix, Plex, Crackle, Pluto, Roku, Tubi, and Prime Video. And as Nick mentioned, like, feel good is a great way to describe this movie. On IMDb, they label it as an adventure, as a comedy, and as a drama. I think you can put this movie into all three of those categories.
Agreed. And so what? 7.6, 9.1. You're looking at an 8.35, 8.4 between the two of us.
I think that's fair.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
I'll take
We're not
that.
going to be too. We're not.
So
that's
the
not
Cinema Bros rating of Hunt for the Wilderpeople, directed by Taika Waititi, is an 8.4. Stream it on Netflix. Comment if you liked it. If you didn't, tell us if you agreed with us. Obviously, we gave a lot of spoilers, so you might know what's going to happen now, but we hope you enjoy it as much as we do.
All right, and now what we're going to do, this is a new feature on the show. We're going to give you the movie that we're watching next week. Or we're reviewing next week, so you can watch it and listen to our review and tell us if you agree or not. Because Nick had picked Hunt for the Wilderpeople, it is now my turn to pick a movie, and we are going to watch You Are So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah, coming out on Netflix, starring Adam Sandler. And it's pretty much Adam Sandler's whole family. Sadie Sandler, it's her bat mitzvah. And then Jackie Sandler is also in this movie. Idina Menzel.
It comes out tomorrow.
Sunny Sandler, Adam Sandler's other daughter. It's great. Both Nick and I have been bar mitzvah in our lives. We understand the work that goes into it as two young Jewish men. We get it. So that's the movie we're reviewing next week. Netflix original, You Are So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah, starring Adam Sandler and basically his whole family.
Wow. Idina Menzel is in it. It's actually directed and written by two people that are not Adam Sandler or Tim Herlihy. So interesting. Very interesting. Directed by Sammy Cohen, Allison Pack. All right.
I think you're excited to watch this.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
All right. Thanks for listening to another edition of Cinema Bros. I'm Spen. He's Nick. Tune in next week, guys.
Catch on the flip.